Alright, so I'm just going to do a quick video here. My end of day process that I do for cleaning and wet capping the printer when I'm done. So I normally get set up. Printer has two print heads. So in the capping station you can see there's your CMYK and your white. So normally I've got two of these out. They're like little Q-tip type things. Got them on Amazon. They're foam shop rags. This is the cleaning solution that came from Ricoma. So normally what I do is I dip this in the solution. So it's wet. I come over to the capping station and I typically just clean around the edge. You'll see the particles and stringy stuff starts coming off. The dry stuff. And again, this just kind of want to go around the edge of this and then inside a little bit. Got to be careful though. You don't want these particles going inside the capping station here. So I'll wipe that down. Actually looks pretty good today. It's been a lot worse. And other days when it's not as humid, this will get really dry. And then you have a squeegee, so when it does its little process of doing like a clean or whatever, and it runs the ink through the capping station, it then runs across this squeegee, which I also take a little bit of this clean and wipe that out pretty good. So I don't worry too much around here because I mean it's just going to get worse over time. So but once I get that done, I toss that in the trash, and then I take my little rag and I wipe this down. Get those little particles off of there. That looks pretty good, and then I use this on the squeegee. And then I get any particles off the edge of the squeegee there. So, and then I do the same process for the CMYK capping station. Get this wet. Come into here, around the edge. This one actually puts quite a bit of ink on your little Q-tip. Once I get that, this doesn't get all stringy and built up like the white does. The white ink is obviously the problem. So then once I have that, I again use the Q-tip on the squeegee. It goes in the trash. I take my rag. I'll wipe around the edge. Squeegee off. You never want to take and wipe the black this way on the squeegee because you don't want it to get around the side where you got the white on the squeegee. So remember to kind of keep it separate. But that's pretty much all I do on the cleanup around the capping station. So once I've done that, I did buy this wet cap solution from DTF Superstore, and I load a little bit into the syringe with this little plastic tip, and then the amount I put in is, and some people say fill it up to the top, but I don't normally do that. So I'll put in roughly that much in the white station, And then the same in the CMYK. I think that's about half full on the capping stations with a cleaning solution. So once I do that, the printer is ready to go back to rest. So typically I do that. I was pressing the origin button previously, but that for some reason was setting my margin. Right now it's set to 100 millimeters, which is based on this 10, which is, you just add a 0 to it is 100. So, but every time I press the origin button, it brings the car assembly back, or the head assembly back, and it lowers it in, or raises the capping stations up to it, but it would always change my margin to something different. So I stopped pressing the origin button to get it to go back. So normally what I do is I just press right, and it'll bring the carriage back. And once it's all the way to the right, on the software, I normally do it inside the software. When you close this program, you'll see when I close the application, when I want to close it, I'll quickly switch back over to the printer. You'll see what happens. So I say yes. When I said yes, this capping station came back up, and it actually seats itself against the printheads again. So those printheads are now setting in that cleaning solution overnight. So once I've done that process, and I know the capping stations have been cleaned, the wet capping solution is in there, the capping station's back up. At this stage, I just turn off the printer, and I turn off my converter. The powder shaker goes. The only two I normally leave on are step auto and step manual. Those are normally always left on. And at the end of the day, I just flick the little breaker down the bottom to turn this part of the system off. And that's it. And then one thing I do is sometimes you're working with prints and the powders and stuff. The powder sometimes will get on this part of the tray going in, because a lot of times if you have singles that you're doing, you'll open this up and you're putting the powder on a transfer, and you're powdering it, and you're trying to get the excess off. Well, when you do that, it falls down in here. So part of my process too is I take a rag and I just make sure all of that powder's out of that area, so that way when a print goes in, it doesn't pick up that powder on that side of the film you don't want it to be on. One thing to note too that I've been kind of dealing with is when I have a print coming out, if this is on preheat, this gets really hot, and depending on humidity, you can build up a lot of static electricity on this entrance into the shaker. And what will happen is if that static builds up and the film starts to stick on the metal here, the film will start to back up, and it'll start to rise up in the printer. And then what happens is this front part of the car, they call it a car assembly, this assembly here, this little part here, starts to hit the film, because the film's kind of raising up off the printer, and then this starts to cut into the film, not cut the film, but starts to cut into your ink that you've already printed. So you got to make sure that this stays clean and clear. So when I'm printing a first print, getting it situated, I always monitor this very closely to make sure that it's feeding correctly down into the shaker. And then at that point, once I've got a good powder loop going, then I go ahead and don't have to watch it too much. You still got to keep an eye on it, but that's what I do for that. One thing I do is when I'm printing, I don't know if most of you might want to do something like this. I get these little magnets. They're pretty heavy duty. Got them on Amazon. I have some here. Excuse me. But what I do initially is once the print starts coming out down through here, and it's not long enough to reach up to the conveyor belt yet, I'll grab the film and I'll put it up here with this magnet on the bar, and the film will be attached to that. So then the film continues to come in and it starts to go down in for its powder loop. And then I typically hit powder manual a couple of times to let it run and drop some powder onto the film. As the powder gets on the film and the film keeps coming in, it starts creating that powder loop down below. Then eventually your print or the ink starts getting in the powder, and then as it gets closer and closer to the bottom, then I'll take this magnet off of the film and put it back on here, and then I'll grab the film and I'll pull it up onto the conveyor, turn on the vacuum, and then it holds it down, and then I'll continue to let it do its process. And at that point I turn on the powder clear, and the paddles start kicking in and knocking the back of the film to get the excess powder off. So, but that's a little bit of my process. I'll probably do a more involved video of that start to finish. One thing to note too is when your gang sheets are coming out the back of the dryer there, if you have a take-up roll, it's ideal to tape it onto it and get it rolling up on your take-up roll, because that creates tension on the film, and that tension helps to prevent. Normally when the film comes through the dryer, you're going to get little wrinkles and stuff. You can turn off the vacuum, reposition the film, turn the vacuum back on, and that'll kind of smooth it out. It's just the way the oven works. So what I've noticed though is if you've got it set up where it's being picked up on the take-up reel, it's creating a tension, and that actually helps to, keep those little wrinkles. They're not horrible. And it doesn't affect the print or the transfer when they get them, but I just think it's a good idea if you have that to utilize it again. And you're only going to use that if you've got a length of gang sheets going through it. If you've got some small prints, you're not going to use that take-up reel. So, but anyways, that's my video for today. Hope it helps out. If you have any questions, please leave some comments below, and I'll do my best to help you out. We'll see you on the next one.